Millionaire hired a nurse to care for his dying dog. The next day, something surprising happened. The sun was beginning to set behind the towering skyscrapers of New York City, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sarah Thompson, a 28-year-old nurse, walked hurriedly through the bustling streets of downtown, her brow furrowed and her mind lost in worry. Her footsteps echoed on the sidewalk as she dodged pedestrians returning home after a long day of work. Sarah had just finished her shift at the public hospital where she worked, and her heart was racing, not from the pace of her walk, but from the anxiety consuming her. Bills were piling up in her small apartment, and the cost of her mother's medications, who suffered from a chronic illness, increased month after month. Despite her long hours and unwavering dedication, a nurse's salary barely covered basic expenses. Absorbed in her thoughts, she almost collided with a street vendor offering hot dogs on the corner. She apologized distractedly and continued on her way when suddenly her phone vibrated in the pocket of her uniform. It was an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment before answering, but something inside told her it could be important. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Miss Sarah Thompson?" asked a male voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, that's me. Who am I speaking to?" "My name is Richard Goldstein. I'm calling because I have a job offer that might interest you." Sarah stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat. A job offer? Where had this come from? "Excuse me, Mr. Goldstein, how did you get my number?" she asked, intrigued and a little wary. "An acquaintance of yours, Doctor Roberts, spoke very highly of you and provided me with your contact. I hope you don't mind." Sarah remembered Dr. Roberts, a respected colleague with whom she had worked on several difficult cases. If she had recommended this man, perhaps it was worth hearing what he had to say. "I see. What is this proposal about, Mr. Goldstein?" "I'd prefer to discuss it in person if possible." "Could we meet tomorrow morning at the Bluebird Cafe in Upper East Side?" Sarah hesitated for a moment. Her hospital shift started at noon, so technically she had the morning free. Plus, curiosity and the need to find a solution to her financial problems urged her to accept. "All right, Mr. Goldstein, how about 9 a.m.? "Perfect. I'll see you tomorrow, Ms. Thompson." "Have a good night." The call ended, leaving Sarah with a mix of emotions. Intrigue, hope, and a touch of apprehension swirled in her mind as she resumed her walk home. That night, Sarah could barely sleep. Her mind kept racing, imagining what kind of proposal it could be. Maybe a job at a private clinic? Or perhaps caring for an ill relative of this mysterious Mr. Goldstein. Whatever it was, she promised herself to keep a cool head and not get her hopes up until she knew all the details. The next morning, Sarah dressed carefully, choosing a professional but not too formal outfit. A white blouse, black pants, and comfortable shoes. She tied her hair back in a neat bun and applied subtle makeup. She wanted to make a good impression without appearing desperate. The Bluebird Cafe was an elegant yet cozy establishment, with polished wooden tables and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee floating in the air. Sarah arrived a few minutes before the agreed time and chose a table near the window from where she could observe the entrance. At 9 due sharp, a middle-aged man dressed in an impeccable suit and carrying a leather briefcase entered the cafe. His eyes scanned the place until they settled on Sarah. With a determined step, he approached her table. "Miss Thompson?" he asked with a courteous smile. Sarah stood up, extending her hand. "Yes, that's me. You must be Mr. Goldstein." "Indeed. It's a pleasure to meet you in person." He shook her hand firmly before taking a seat across from her. After ordering 2 coffees, Richard Goldstein got straight to the point. "Miss Thompson, the reason I've contacted you is because I need someone with your skills and experience for a very special and well-paid job." Sarah nodded, encouraging him to continue. "You see, I have a dog, Max, who is suffering from a terminal illness. I need someone who can care for him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Someone with medical knowledge who can administer his medications, monitor his condition, and ensure that his last days are as comfortable as possible." Sarah blinked, surprised. Of all the possibilities she had imagined, this hadn't occurred to her. "A dog?" she asked, making sure she had heard correctly. Goldstein nodded solemnly. "I know it may sound strange, but Max is very important to me. He's more than a pet, he's family, and I'm willing to pay generously for his care." He took an envelope out of his briefcase and slid it across the table to Sarah. "Here's a detailed offer. including the salary and job conditions. Please take a look. Sarah opened the envelope with trembling hands, and when she saw the figure written on the paper, she had to contain an exclamation of surprise. It was more money than she had earned in the entire previous year. "This is so very generous, Mr. Goldstein," she said, trying to maintain her composure. "Excellence has its price, Miss Thompson, and from what I've been told, you are excellent at what you do." Sarah quickly read the rest of the document, her mind working at full speed. The job would require her to move into Goldstein's mansion, on the outskirts of the city, for the duration of Max's treatment. It would be a radical change in her life, but with that salary, she could pay off all her debts and guarantee the best treatment for her mother. "When would you need me to start?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "As soon as possible." "How about tomorrow?" Sarah took a deep breath. It was an important decision that would completely change the course of her life. But thinking about her mother, the unpaid bills, and the opportunity to finally have financial stability, she knew there was only one possible answer. "I accept, Mr. Goldstein. I'll be ready to start tomorrow." An enigmatic smile appeared on Richard Goldstein's face. "Excellent decision, Miss Thompson. Welcome aboard." As they shook hands to seal the agreement, Sarah couldn't imagine that she had just embarked on an adventure that would test not only her nursing skills, but also her strength, integrity, and her very freedom. The sun had barely risen on the horizon when Sarah, with a suitcase in hand and a pounding heart, climbed into the luxurious car that Richard Goldstein had sent to pick her up. The driver, a serious-looking man in a dark suit, remained silent throughout the journey, increasing the feeling of nervousness growing inside Sarah. As the urban landscape gradually gave way to extensive fields and wooded hills, Sarah mentally reviewed the events of the previous night. After accepting Goldstein's offer, she had returned home in a whirlwind of emotions. The conversation with her mother, Mrs. Emily Thompson, had been especially difficult. "But honey, how can you leave your job at the hospital just like that from one day to the next?" Mrs. Thompson had asked, concern evident in her tired voice. Sarah, sitting on the edge of her mother's bed, had taken her hands tenderly. "Mum, this job will give us the opportunity to pay for your medications without worrying. I'll be able to send you money to hire someone to help you at home. I'm not worried about the money, Sarah dear. I'm worried about you. That man, this Goldstein, are you sure he can be trusted?" Her mother's question had echoed her own doubts, but Sarah had opted to show a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Dr. Roberts recommended him, Mum. Besides, it'll only be for a while. I promise I'll be careful." Now, as the car wound its way down a road lined with century-old trees, Sarah wondered if she had made the right decision. The car's sudden stop snapped her out of her musings. "We've arrived, Miss Thompson," announced the driver, breaking his silence for the first time. Sarah got out of the car and was left speechless at the sight before her. Goldstein's mansion was an imposing colonial-style structure, with immaculate white walls and red tile roofs, surrounded by meticulously manicured gardens, and with a stone fountain in the center of the driveway. The property seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Richard Goldstein was waiting at the main door, dressed in an impeccable suit despite the early hour. At his side, a middle-aged woman in a housekeeper's uniform observed Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Welcome to your new home, Ms. Thompson," Goldstein greeted with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I hope you had a pleasant journey." "Thank you, Mr. Goldstein," Sarah responded, striving to maintain a professional tone despite her amazement. "The trip was very comfortable. I'm glad. Allow me to introduce you to Margaret, our housekeeper. She will show you to your room and explain the house rules." Margaret nodded curtly and gestured for Sarah to follow her into the mansion. The foyer was as impressive as the exterior, with polished marble floors and a spiral staircase rising to the second floor. "Your room is in the east wing," Margaret explained as they climbed the stairs. "Mr. Goldstein insisted that you be close to Max's quarters, so you can attend to him quickly if necessary." Sarah nodded, absorbed in the opulence surrounding her. Paintings that seemed expensive adorned the walls, and every piece of furniture screamed luxury and exclusivity. The room assigned to her was spacious and elegant, with a king-size bed, a mahogany desk, and a large wardrobe. A large window offered a panoramic view of the property's back gardens. "It's beautiful," Sarah murmured, setting her suitcase down next to the bed. "I'm glad you like it," Margaret responded, though her tone didn't reflect any emotion. "Now let me explain the house rules." The list of rules that Margaret proceeded to enumerate made Sarah frown with growing concern. No visitors were allowed without prior authorization from Goldstein. Phone use was restricted to 1 hour a day. Internet access was limited and monitored. Leaving the property had to be approved in advance and only for justified reasons. "Is this really necessary?" Sarah asked, feeling her initial enthusiasm rapidly fading. "These are Mr. Goldstein's conditions," Margaret responded firmly. "If you don't agree, you can always resign." Sarah thought of her mother, the pending bills, the opportunity this job represented. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I understand. I'll do my best to adapt." "Good," said Margaret, her expression softening slightly. "Now come with me, it's time for you to meet Max." She followed Margaret down a long hallway until they reached a pair of carved oak double doors. Margaret knocked softly before opening them. The room was spacious and adapted for the needs of a sick dog. In the center, on a luxurious pet bed, lay Max. He was a golden Great Dane, whose majesty was still evident despite his weakened condition. Upon seeing Sarah, Max raised his head and looked at her with tired but curious eyes. Sarah felt an immediate connection with the animal and slowly approached, extending her hand for him to sniff. "Hello, Max," she said softly. "I'm Sarah. I'm here to take care of you." To her surprise, Max rose with effort and rested his large head on her hand as if greeting her. Sarah couldn't help but smile, feeling that perhaps, after all, she had made the right decision. "It seems he likes you," commented a voice from the door. Richard Goldstein had entered silently and was observing the scene with an indecipherable expression. "That's good. Max doesn't usually trust strangers easily." Sarah turned to look at him, noticing a flash of something, sadness, guilt, in Goldstein's eyes before his expression returned to neutral. "Max is a beautiful dog," Sarah said. "Can you tell me more about his condition?" Goldstein nodded and began to explain Max's diagnosis and treatment. As she listened, Sarah couldn't help but notice how the dog seemed to tense at his owner's presence, a behavior that contrasted with the warm welcome he had given her. As Goldstein spoke, Sarah felt there was more to this situation than met the eye. The strict house rules, Max's behavior, Goldstein's enigmatic attitude, everything pointed to a mystery she was eager to unravel. As she gently stroked Max's fur, Sarah promised herself that, in addition to caring for the dog, she would discover what secrets the walls of this luxurious mansion held. What she didn't know was that this curiosity would lead her down a path full of shocking revelations and difficult decisions that would test her integrity and her courage. Days at the Goldstein mansion passed with an almost mechanical routine. Sarah would wake up at dawn, prepare Max's medications, and spend most of the day caring for the Great Dane. Despite the opulence surrounding her, she couldn't shake off a sense of unease that seemed to permeate every corner of the property. One morning, while walking Max through the extensive gardens, an activity Goldstein had authorized to aid in the dog's recovery, Sarah noticed something strange. In one of the second-floor windows, she thought she saw a figure watching them. When she blinked and looked again, the silhouette had disappeared. "Did you see that, Max?" she murmured, patting the dog's head. Max whimpered softly, as if sharing her unease. That evening during dinner, an elaborate affair that Goldstein insisted on sharing with her each day, Sarah decided to probe a little deeper. "Mr. Goldstein," she began, carefully choosing her words, "I've noticed the mansion is very large. Does anyone else live here besides us and the service staff?" Goldstein looked up from his plate, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "No, Miss Thompson. It's just us and the essential staff. Why do you ask?" Sarah shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just curiosity. It's a very big house for so few people." "Privacy is a luxury I value greatly," Goldstein responded, his tone making it clear the topic was closed. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah decided to do some exploring. She slipped silently through the hallways, her steps muffled by the thick carpets. As she turned a corner, she almost collided with Margaret, who looked at her with surprise and something that seemed like fear. "Miss Thompson," said the housekeeper, quickly regaining her composure. "Do you need anything?" "No, I was just taking a walk. I couldn't sleep," Sarah responded, noticing that Margaret was hiding something behind her back. "I see. But I recommend you return to your room. Mr. Goldstein doesn't approve of wandering around the house at night." With a stiff nod, Margaret quickly walked away, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. Over the next few days, Sarah dedicated herself to observing her surroundings more closely. She noticed how the service staff spoke in whispers and fell silent abruptly when she approached. She saw how Goldstein spent long hours locked in his study, from which heated phone arguments occasionally emerged. But what intrigued her most was Max's behavior. The dog, who had quickly become attached to her, seemed to have a complicated relationship with Goldstein. Although he obeyed his owner's commands, Sarah could feel the tension in the animal's body whenever Goldstein was near. One afternoon, while searching the drawers for more bandages to change Max's dressing, Sarah found a hidden envelope at the bottom. Her heart raced when she saw it was addressed to "My dear Sarah," in an elegant handwriting that wasn't Goldstein's. With trembling hands, she took the letter out of the envelope and began to read. "My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way to the Goldstein mansion. I know you'll be confused and possibly scared, but you must know that nothing is as it seems. Richard Goldstein is not the man you think he is. I can't tell you much in this letter for fear it might fall into the wrong hands, but you need to know that you're in danger. Max is the key to everything. Take good care of him and pay attention to his behavior. He will guide you. Be cautious, dear. Don't trust anyone in that house, especially Goldstein. And whatever happens, don't—" The letter ended abruptly there, as if the author had been interrupted. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Who had written this letter? And why did they call her Dear Sarah, as if they knew her? Before she could think more about it, she heard footsteps approaching. Quickly, she put the letter back in its place and closed the drawer just as Goldstein entered the room. "Ah, Sarah," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes as usual. "How is our patient today?" "Improving, Mr. Goldstein," she responded, struggling to maintain her composure. "Although he still needs a lot of rest and care." Goldstein nodded, his gaze scanning the room as if looking for something out of place. "Excellent. Keep up the good work, Miss Thompson. Max is very important to me." When Goldstein left, Sarah approached Max and hugged him gently, her mind spinning with unanswered questions. "What's going on here, Max?" she whispered. "What secrets does this house hide? And more importantly, who am I really?" As she stroked Max's fur, Sarah made a decision. She was going to get to the bottom of this mystery, no matter the risks. But she would have to be cautious, very cautious. That night, as she prepared for bed, Sarah couldn't help but feel that the eyes in the portraits on the walls were following her, as if the secrets of the Goldstein mansion were watching her every move. She went to bed with a mixture of determination and fear, knowing that from that moment on, every step she took could bring her closer to the truth, or to danger. What Sarah didn't know was that her actions had already set in motion a series of events that would shake the foundations of her reality and force her to question everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. The following morning dawned grey and rainy, as if the weather reflected Sarah's inner turmoil. As she prepared Max's breakfast, her mind couldn't stop spinning around the mysterious letter she had found. Who had written it, and why did it imply she was in danger? A thunder rumbled in the distance, causing Max to whimper softly. Sarah knelt beside the dog, gently stroking his fur. "It's okay, buddy," she murmured. "I'm here with you." At that moment, Margaret entered the room, startling at the sight of Sarah. "Ms. Thompson," said the housekeeper, quickly regaining her composure, "Mr. Goldstein wishes to see you in his study immediately." Sarah nodded, exchanging a worried look with Max before following Margaret through the long hallways of the mansion. Upon reaching the study, Margaret knocked softly on the door. "Come in," Goldstein's voice was heard from inside. Sarah entered, finding Goldstein standing by the window, observing the rain falling on the gardens. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Thompson," he began, "I've noticed that lately you seem distracted. Is there anything bothering you?" Sarah swallowed, aware that she must choose her words carefully. "No, Mr. Goldstein. I'm simply focused on caring for Max." Goldstein observed her in silence for a moment, as if trying to read her thoughts. "I understand. However, I must remind you of the importance of discretion in this house. There are delicate matters that require absolute confidentiality." "Of course, Mr. Goldstein," Sarah responded, maintaining a neutral tone. "I'm aware of my responsibilities." "I'm glad to hear it," said Goldstein, approaching his desk, "because I have an additional task for you." He took an envelope from a drawer and handed it to Sarah, I need you to take this to the city and deliver it personally to this address. I don't trust courier services for something so important." Sarah took the envelope, noting its weight and the wax seal that closed it. "When should I do it?" "Today," Goldstein replied. "Margaret will drive you to the city and wait for you. Remember, Ms. Thompson, this is of utmost importance and absolute confidentiality." Sarah nodded, feeling that this could be her opportunity to get some answers. "Understood, Mr. Goldstein. I'll do it right away." As she prepared to leave, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. On one hand, she was relieved to have additional help. On the other, the revelations about the extent of her situation made her feel even smaller in the grand scheme of things. The trip to the city took place in tense silence. Margaret drove with her eyes fixed on the road, ignoring Sarah's attempts to start a conversation. Upon arriving at their destination, an office building in the city center, Sarah got out of the car with the envelope in hand. "I'll wait for you here," Margaret said dryly. "Don't be long." Sarah entered the building, following the directions to an office with the name Dr. James Wilson on the door. She knocked softly, and a voice from inside invited her to enter. Dr. Wilson turned out to be a middle-aged man with glasses and a kind expression. Upon seeing Sarah, his eyes opened with surprise. "Sarah?" he asked, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Is it you?" Sarah froze. You know me." The doctor stood up from his desk, approaching her cautiously. "Sarah, don't you remember me? It's me, Dr. Wilson. I was your doctor for years." Confusion overtook Sarah. "But that's impossible. I never—" "Oh my God," murmured Dr. Wilson, his face paling. "You don't remember, do you? Sarah, you've been—" Before he could finish his sentence, the door burst open. Margaret entered, her face a mask of fury. "Get away from her," shouted the housekeeper, grabbing Sarah's arm. "You have no right to talk to her." "Margaret, please," exclaimed Dr. Wilson. "She needs to know the truth. You can't keep her in the dark forever." Sarah broke free from Margaret's grip, her mind spinning. "What are you talking about? What truth?" Dr. Wilson looked at her with compassion. "Sarah, you've been—" But before he could finish, Margaret pulled out a small device from her purse and pressed it against Sarah's neck. An electric buzz was the last thing Sarah heard before everything went black. When Sarah regained consciousness, she found herself back in her room at the Goldstein mansion. Max was by her side, licking her hand with concern. She sat up slowly, her head throbbing. What happened?" she murmured, trying to order her confused thoughts. At that moment, the door opened and Goldstein entered, his face a mixture of concern and something else, guilt. "Sarah," he said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm so sorry about what happened. We didn't want you to find out this way." "Find out what?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Who am I really? Why don't I remember Dr. Wilson?" Goldstein sighed deeply. "Sarah, there's something you need to know. You're not who you think you are. The truth is that—" At that moment, a thunderous noise resonated throughout the mansion. Screams and the sound of breaking glass came from the lower floor. Goldstein jumped to his feet, his face pale with terror. "No," he whispered. "They've found us." Sarah stood up, protectively grabbing Max. "Who's found us? What's going on?" Goldstein looked at her, fear evident in his eyes. "There's no time for explanations. We have to go. Now." As Goldstein dragged her out of the room, with Max following close behind, Sarah felt her world crumbling around her. Who was she really? Why had they kept her in the dark? And most importantly, who were they running from? The answers to these questions, Sarah sensed, would change her life forever. But for now, all she could do was run, with the sound of footsteps rapidly approaching behind them. Sarah's heart raced as she ran through the mansion's hallways, following Goldstein and with Max close at her heels. The sounds of commotion on the lower floor grew louder, mixing with the roar of the storm that lashed the exterior. "This way," shouted Goldstein, directing them towards a door hidden behind a tapestry. He opened it quickly, revealing a secret passageway. "Hurry, get in." Sarah hesitated for a second, her mind a whirlwind of questions and confusion. But Max's urgent bark snapped her out of her stupor. Making a quick decision, she entered the dark passage, with the dog following her closely. Goldstein closed the door behind them, plunging the passageway into darkness. Only the dim light of a flashlight he pulled from his pocket illuminated the way. "Mr. Goldstein," Sarah gasped as they advanced through the narrow corridor. I need answers. Who am I really? Why don't I remember anything about my past? Goldstein stopped for a moment, his face a mask of guilt and concern in the flickering light. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never wanted things to come to this point. The truth is that you are... A deafening crash interrupted his words. The floor shook beneath their feet, and dust fell from the ceiling of the passageway. There's no time, exclaimed Goldstein. We must reach the end of the tunnel. I promise I'll explain everything when we're safe. They continued their race through the passageway, which seemed to extend endlessly beneath the mansion. Sarah could feel Max panting beside her, the large dog keeping close to her, as if wanting to protect her. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached a metal door. Goldstein entered a series of codes into an electronic panel, and the door opened with a hiss, revealing an underground garage with several vehicles. Get in that car, Goldstein ordered, pointing to an unassuming black sedan. I'll drive. Sarah obeyed, helping Max into the back seat before occupying the passenger seat. Goldstein started the engine, and with a roar the car shot out through a tunnel that opened before them. As the vehicle accelerated through the dark passage, Sarah clung to her seat, her mind spinning. Please, she pleaded, I need to know the truth. Who am I? Goldstein sighed deeply, his eyes fixed on the road ahead of them. Your real name is Sarah Goldstein. You're my daughter. The revelation hit Sarah like a bolt of lightning. Your daughter, but how is that possible? I don't remember any of that. 3 years ago, Goldstein began, his voice laden with emotion, you suffered an accident that left you in a coma for months. When you woke up, you had lost much of your memory. Sarah felt as if the world was fading around her. An accident? Why didn't you tell me before? The doctors warned that an emotional shock could be dangerous for your recovery, Goldstein explained. We decided to create a controlled environment, allowing you to regain your memories gradually. The story of the nurse hired to care for Max was a way to keep you close and protected while we worked on your recovery. And Max? Sarah asked, turning to look at the dog who was watching her with eyes full of unwavering loyalty. Max is your dog, Goldstein responded with a sad smile. He's always been yours. He was the only one who managed to connect with you after the accident. That's why I insisted you care for him. I hoped he would help you remember. Sarah fell silent, trying to process all this information. Fragments of memories, like scattered pieces of a puzzle, began to appear in her mind. Blurry images of a life she didn't recognize, but somehow felt familiar. And who are the people chasing us? She finally asked. Goldstein's face darkened. That's a complicated story, Sarah. Our family and our company. We're involved in businesses that have created powerful enemies. People who would do anything to destroy us. What kind of business? Sarah insisted. Goldstein hesitated for a moment before answering. Advanced genetic research. Our work could revolutionize medicine, but it also has applications that some consider dangerous. There are those who believe it's too much power to be in private hands. The tunnel ended abruptly, and the car emerged onto a rural road lashed by rain. Goldstein accelerated, the lights of the city they were leaving behind fading in the distance. Where are we going? Sarah asked, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. To a safe place, Goldstein responded. A refuge I prepared years ago in case of emergency. We'll be safe there while we decide our next move. Sarah leaned back in her seat, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and unanswered questions. She looked in the rearview mirror, seeing Max curled up in the back seat, his eyes fixed on her with a devotion she now understood. As the car moved further and further away from the life she thought she knew, Sarah realized she was on the brink of a new chapter in her life, a chapter full of dangers, secrets, and discoveries about herself and her past. I promise we'll recover your life, Sarah, said Goldstein, his voice laden with determination. Together we'll face whatever comes. Sarah nodded silently, her hand instinctively seeking Max's fur for comfort. As the rain pounded the windshield and the darkness of night enveloped them, she prepared for the unknown, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. What she didn't know was that the revelations of that night were just the beginning. The deepest and most dangerous secrets were yet to be revealed, and the path ahead was full of challenges that would test not only her courage, but also her very identity. The light of dawn was just beginning to filter through the clouds when Goldstein's car finally came to a stop in front of a rustic cabin hidden deep in a dense forest. Sarah, who had fallen into an uneasy sleep during the journey, woke with a start. "Where are we?" she asked, rubbing her eyes and observing the unfamiliar surroundings. Goldstein turned off the engine and turned to her with a tired smile. "This is our refuge, Sarah. We'll be safe here for a while." They got out of the car, Max stretching and shaking himself after the long journey. The cabin, though modest in appearance, was well built and seemed perfectly integrated into the wooded landscape. Once inside, Sarah was surprised to discover that the interior was much more sophisticated than the exterior suggested. High-tech communication equipment, surveillance screens, and an area that looked like a miniature laboratory occupied much of the space. "Wow," Sarah murmured, slowly turning to take it all in. "This is impressive." Goldstein nodded as he activated the security systems. "I prepared it years ago, hoping never to have to use it. But it's always better to be prepared." Sarah sank into a sofa, feeling the weight of recent events. Max curled up at her feet, as if sensing her need for comfort. "Dad," she began, the word sounding strange on her lips, "I need you to tell me everything. No secrets this time." Goldstein sighed deeply, sitting across from her. "You're right. I owe you that. Where do you want me to start?" "From the beginning," Sarah replied. "Who was my mother? What happened to her?" A shadow of pain crossed Goldstein's face. "Your mother, Elizabeth, was brilliant. An exceptional scientist. She was the one who initiated our research in advanced genetics. We were working on something revolutionary, something that could change the world." "What was it?" Sarah asked, leaning forward with interest. "A method to reprogram human DNA," Goldstein explained. "Imagine being able to eliminate genetic diseases, increase resistance to viruses, potentially even extend human life. The possibilities were endless." Sarah frowned. "But that sounds dangerous. Isn't that playing God?" Goldstein nodded solemnly. "That was exactly the concern of many, including a group of activists who were strongly opposed to our work. They were responsible for the accident that left you in a coma and that took your mother." Sarah felt as if the air had been ripped from her lungs. "My mother is missing," Goldstein quickly completed. "The car you and she were traveling in was found wrecked at the bottom of a ravine. They rescued you, but your mother, they never found her body." Tears began to run down Sarah's cheeks. Fragments of memories, blurry but painful, began to surface in her mind. The smiling face of a woman, the sound of a warm laugh, the scent of jasmine. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked between sobs. Goldstein moved closer, kneeling in front of her and taking her hands. "I'm so sorry, my girl. The doctor said an emotional shock could be devastating to your recovery. I wanted to protect you, give you time to heal. Maybe I was wrong." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "And what happened to the research after the accident?" "We suspended it," Goldstein replied. "It was too dangerous to continue. But there are those who believe we're still working on it in secret. That's why they're chasing us. They want the research, either to destroy it or to use it themselves." At that moment, one of the surveillance screens emitted an alert beep. Goldstein jumped up, quickly approaching the monitor. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, alarmed. "Someone's approaching," Goldstein murmured, his eyes scanning the images from cameras hidden in the forest. "But this is impossible. No one knows the location of this place." Sarah approached the screen, her heart beating hard. In the blurry image, she could make out a solitary figure advancing through the trees. "Who is it?" she whispered. Goldstein shook his head, his face pale. "I don't know, but we can't take risks. We must prepare to leave immediately." As Goldstein began to hurriedly gather documents and equipment, Sarah couldn't take her eyes off the screen. There was something in the way that figure moved that seemed strangely familiar to her. Suddenly the figure looked up, as if looking directly at the hidden camera. Sarah stifled a gasp. Although the image was blurry, those eyes, that look, "It can't be," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "What's wrong?" Goldstein asked, turning to her with concern. Sarah turned slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of shock, hope, and fear. "Dad, I think it's Mum. I think Mum has found us." Goldstein's face paled even more, a mix of emotions crossing his features: disbelief, hope, and fear. "Impossible," he whispered. "Elizabeth is—" But before he could finish the sentence, A loud knock resonated on the cabin door. Max began to bark, his tail wagging frantically as if recognizing a familiar scent. Sarah and Goldstein looked at each other, frozen in place. The moment of truth had arrived, and with it the promise of answers that could change everything they thought they knew. With trembling hands, Sarah approached the door. She took a deep breath, gathering all her courage, and turned the knob. The door opened slowly, revealing a figure Sarah only knew through blurry photographs and fragmented memories. A middle-aged woman with wind-blown grey hair and eyes that reflected years of pain and determination. "Mum?" Sarah whispered, her voice broken with emotion. The woman smiled softly, tears forming in her eyes. "Hello, my girl. I'm back." And with those words, Sarah's world, which had already been shaken to its foundations, prepared for another radical transformation. The answers she had so longed for were about to be revealed, but would she be prepared for the truths they would bring with them? Time seemed to stand still in the small forest cabin. Sarah, her heart racing wildly, couldn't take her eyes off the woman standing in the doorway. Elizabeth, her mother, whom she had believed lost for so long, was there, flesh and blood. "How?" was all Sarah could articulate before tears began to run down her cheeks. Elizabeth stepped forward, opening her arms. Without thinking twice, Sarah threw herself into them, melting into an embrace she had longed for without even knowing it. The scent of jasmine, so familiar and comforting, flooded her senses, awakening memories buried deep in her mind. "My girl," Elizabeth whispered, stroking Sarah's hair. "You've grown so much. I'm so sorry for all the time we lost." Goldstein, who had remained paralyzed since Elizabeth's appearance, finally found his voice. "Elizabeth," he said, his tone a mixture of amazement and caution, "how is this possible? We searched for you for years." Elizabeth gently separated from Sarah and looked at Goldstein, her eyes reflecting a mix of complex emotions. "Richard," she said firmly, "we have a lot to talk about." The three entered the cabin, Max moving nervously between them, as if sensing the tension in the air. Elizabeth sat on the sofa, with Sarah at her side, unable to let go of her mother's newly found hand. "Mom," Sarah began, "where have you been all this time? Why didn't you come back sooner?" Elizabeth sighed deeply, her eyes reflecting years of pain and secrets. "It's a long story, honey. A story that involves betrayal, danger, and impossible decisions." Goldstein visibly tensed at these words. "Elizabeth, perhaps we should discuss this in private first." "No, Richard," Elizabeth interrupted firmly. "No more secrets. Sarah deserves to know the truth, the whole truth." She turned to her daughter, taking her hands in hers. "Sarah, the accident we had, it wasn't an accident. It was an attempt to silence us, to stop our research. But it wasn't the work of activists as you've been led to believe." Sarah frowned, confused. "What do you mean? If it wasn't the activists, then who?" Elizabeth looked directly at Goldstein before answering. "It was the government, Sarah. Or more precisely, a faction within the government that wanted to take control of our research for their own purposes." Goldstein stood up abruptly. "Elizabeth, please think about what you're saying. You're putting our daughter in danger with these accusations." "Accusations?" Elizabeth replied, her voice charged with indignation. "You know very well it's the truth, Richard. You've known from the beginning." Sarah looked from one to the other, her mind struggling to process this new information. "Wait, I don't understand. Dad, did you know about this?" Goldstein ran a hand over his face, the weight of years of secrets finally taking its toll. "Sarah, Yes, I knew, but everything I've done has been to protect you." "Protect me?" Sarah exclaimed, standing up. "Lying to me is your idea of protection?" Elizabeth intervened, her voice softening. "Sarah, your father did what he thought was right at the time, but now it's time for you to know the whole truth." Over the next few hours, Elizabeth unraveled a story that seemed straight out of a spy novel. She spoke of how their genetic research had attracted the attention of a secret government agency, of how they had tried to pressure them to hand over their discoveries. "When we refused," Elizabeth explained, "they decided to take more drastic measures. The accident was their way of eliminating me and ensuring the research fell into their hands." "But you survived," Sarah said, clinging to every word. Elizabeth nodded. "Barely. When I regained consciousness, I was in a clandestine hospital. They told me you and your father had died in the accident. They kept me captive, trying to force me to continue the research for them. How did you escape? Sarah asked, fascinated and horrified in equal parts. With help, Elizabeth replied, a small smile forming on her lips. There were people within the agency who didn't agree with these methods. They helped me escape, but I had to remain hidden, working in secret to dismantle the operation from within. Sarah turned to Goldstein, who had remained silent throughout the explanation. And you? Why didn't you tell me any of this? Goldstein approached, kneeling in front of Sarah. Because I thought it was the only way to keep you safe. If you believed your mother had died, if you knew nothing about the true nature of our research, I hoped they would leave you alone. But you continued with the research, Elizabeth said, her tone accusatory. Goldstein nodded slowly. Yes, but not for them. I was looking for a way to use our discoveries to protect us, to create a defense against any attempt at unwanted genetic manipulation. Sarah stood up, moving away from both of them. Her mind was spinning with all this new information. Her life, her identity, everything she thought she knew had been called into question in a matter of hours. And now what? She finally asked, turning to look at her parents. What does all this mean for us? Elizabeth and Goldstein exchanged a look before Elizabeth answered. It means we're in danger, honey. Now that I've come out of the shadows, they'll come after us with everything they've got. But it also means we have a chance, Goldstein added. A chance to end this once and for all, to expose the truth and ensure our research is used for the good of humanity, not for control or destruction. Sarah looked at Max, who had remained faithfully by her side throughout the conversation. The dog returned her gaze, his eyes full of unwavering wisdom and loyalty. Then, Sarah said, straightening her shoulders and looking at her parents with determination, what's the plan? Elizabeth smiled, a flash of pride shining in her eyes. The plan, my brave girl, is to fight. Fight for the truth, for justice, and for a future where science serves to unite humanity, not divide it. As the Goldstein family began to outline their strategy, Sarah felt a mixture of fear and excitement. Her life had changed forever, but for the first time in a long time she felt she had a clear purpose. What they didn't know was that, while they were planning their next move, other forces were already in motion. Forces that would stop at nothing to obtain the secrets the Goldstein family possessed. The battle for the future of humanity was about to begin, and Sarah found herself right at the center of it all. The dawn found the Goldstein family in a state of constant alertness. Sarah, who had barely managed to sleep a few hours, woke to the sound of whispered voices coming from the main room of the cabin. Carefully, she got up from the makeshift bed where she had spent the night, Max raising his head to look at her curiously. "Stay here, boy," Sarah murmured, patting the dog's head before silently heading towards the door. As she approached the main room, she could distinguish the voices of her parents engaged in a tense discussion. "We can't trust anyone, Richard," Elizabeth was saying, her voice filled with urgency. "Not even your old contacts." "We need allies, Elizabeth," Goldstein replied. "We can't face a government agency alone." "What about Dr. Wilson?" Elizabeth asked. "He was always loyal to our cause." Sarah held her breath as she heard that name. Dr. Wilson, the doctor who had recognized her in the city. Now she understood why his face had seemed so familiar. "It's risky," Goldstein murmured. "But you're right. If there's anyone we can trust, it's James." At that moment, Sarah decided to make her presence known. She entered the room, startling her parents. "Good morning," she said, trying to maintain a casual tone. "Any plans for today?" Elizabeth and Goldstein exchanged a look before Elizabeth responded. "Sarah, honey, we were discussing our next steps," her mother said, approaching to give her a hug. "There's a lot to do and very little time." Goldstein nodded, his face showing signs of fatigue. "We need to gather evidence, contact potential allies, and most importantly, keep ourselves safe while we do it." Sarah took a seat, her mind quickly processing the situation. What can I do to help? Her parents seemed surprised by her determination, but it was Elizabeth who spoke first. "Sarah, this is dangerous. Perhaps it would be better if you stayed out of it." "No," Sarah interrupted firmly. "This is my fight too. I've spent the last few years living a lie, and now that I know the truth, I'm not going to stand idly by." Goldstein smiled proudly. "That's my girl. Very well then. The first thing we need to do is secure our communications. Elizabeth, do you still have contact with your resistance group?" Elizabeth nodded. "I can get in touch with them securely. They have resources that will be useful to us." "Good," said Goldstein. I'll take care of contacting Dr. Wilson. Sarah, I need you to review these files. He handed her a tablet. They contain crucial information about our research and the people involved. We need to identify potential allies and threats. Sarah took the tablet, feeling the weight of responsibility. Understood. For the next few hours, the cabin became an improvised operations center. Elizabeth worked tirelessly on an encrypted computer, establishing secure connections with her network of contacts. Goldstein alternated between reviewing documents and making coded calls. Sarah, for her part, immersed herself in the files, absorbing years of research and conspiracies in a matter of hours. It was close to midday when Sarah found something that caught her attention. "Dad! Mom!" she called, her voice filled with urgency. "I think you should see this." Her parents quickly approached. Her. On the tablet screen, Sarah had opened a file detailing a series of suspicious financial transactions. "These transfers," Sarah explained, pointing to a series of numbers, "seem to be linked to an account associated with Dr. Wilson." Goldstein paled. "Impossible. James would never—" "Wait," Elizabeth interrupted, leaning in closer. "Look at the dates. These transfers began right after our accident." A tense silence fell over the room as the implications of this discovery sank in. "Dr. Wilson betrayed us," Sarah whispered, the realization hitting her hard. Goldstein collapsed into a chair, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. "All these years I thought he was our friend, our ally." Elizabeth, however, maintained her composure. "This changes everything. We can't trust anyone outside this room." At that moment, a sharp beep from one of the security monitors broke the silence. Goldstein jumped up, running to the screen. "It can't be," he murmured, his voice filled with fear. "They've found us." Sarah and Elizabeth quickly approached. On the screen, they could see several black vehicles approaching along the forest road. "How is this possible?" Sarah asked, panic threatening to overtake her. "No one knew about this place." Elizabeth closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. "Dr. Wilson. He must have given them our location. We have to leave. Now," said Goldstein, moving quickly to gather the most important equipment. Sarah ran to get Max, her heart pounding wildly. As she helped her parents collect essential documents and equipment, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of fear and determination. Her world was crumbling once again, but this time she was determined to fight. "Where will we go?" she asked, as they headed towards the cabin's back exit. Elizabeth, who was leading the group, stopped for a moment to look at her daughter and husband. "I have one last resort, a place that not even Dr. Wilson knows about, but getting there won't be easy." Goldstein nodded, taking Sarah's hand. "We're in this together. Whatever happens, we'll stay united." As they left the cabin and headed into the dense forest, Sarah felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. Her life had taken a complete turn in a matter of days, and now she found herself fleeing from forces she barely understood. But for the first time in a long time, she felt she was exactly where she needed to be, alongside her family, fighting for the truth. What they didn't know was that their escape was about to lead them down a path filled with unimaginable dangers and revelations that would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about themselves and the world around them. The forest closed in around them as the Goldstein family advanced rapidly, moving away from the cabin they had until recently considered their safe haven. Sarah, with Max close at her heels, followed her mother closely, while Goldstein brought up the rear, constantly looking back for signs of pursuit. "Where are we going, Mom?" Sarah whispered, ducking under a low branch. Elizabeth, without slowing her pace, responded in a low voice, "There's an abandoned train station a few kilometers from here. If we can reach it, we can catch a freight train that will take us far from this area." Goldstein approached, his face tense with worry. "Elizabeth, are you sure that place is still safe? If Wilson betrayed us, he might know all our old hideouts." "It's a risk we'll have to take," Elizabeth responded with determination. "Besides, I have an ace up my sleeve that not even you know about, Richard." Before Goldstein could ask more, a distant sound made them stop in their tracks. They could hear voices and the cracking of branches, unmistakable signs that someone was approaching. "They're catching up," Sarah murmured, feeling fear taking hold of her. Elizabeth quickly looked around, assessing their options. "This way," she said, pointing towards a group of moss-covered rocks. "There's a hidden cave behind those rocks. We used it as an emergency hideout in the old days." They hurried towards the rocks, with Max leading the way as if he could sense the urgency of the situation. Indeed, behind a curtain of vines, they found the entrance to a small cave. They entered just in time, hearing how their pursuers' footsteps dangerously approached. Inside the cave, in the dim light, the family huddled in silence. Sarah hugged Max, trying to calm the beating of her heart that seemed to resonate in the confined space. They could hear the voices of the men searching for them, getting closer and closer. "They must be around here," they heard a gruff voice say. "They can't have gone far." "Check every corner," ordered another voice. "The boss wants them alive." The minutes passed like hours as they remained motionless, barely daring to breathe. Finally, the sounds began to fade away, and after what seemed like an eternity, the forest returned to silence. Elizabeth was the first to move, cautiously approaching the cave entrance to ensure the danger had passed. "I think they're gone," she whispered, "but we can't stay here. It's only a matter of time before they return." Goldstein nodded, pulling out a small flashlight from his backpack. As he turned it on, illuminating the interior of the cave, Sarah stifled a cry of surprise. On the cave walls were strange drawings and symbols, some appearing ancient, others more recent. Complex mathematical formulas intermingled with what seemed to be DNA sequences and molecule diagrams. "What is all this?" Sarah asked, approaching to examine the drawings more closely. Elizabeth smiled nostalgically. "This was our true secret laboratory, Sarah. This is where we made our most important discoveries, away from prying eyes and greedy hands." Goldstein approached a particular section of the wall, running his fingers over a series of symbols. This is the heart of our research, the key to reprogramming DNA in a way never before achieved." Sarah looked at the symbols, fascinated. Despite her limited knowledge of genetics, she could sense the importance of what she was seeing. "Can you explain it to me?" Elizabeth approached, pointing to different parts of the diagram. "You see, honey, we discovered a way to communicate with DNA at a fundamental level. Not just modify it, but really interact with it, as if it were a living language. With this knowledge," Goldstein continued, "we could potentially cure genetic diseases, increase resistance to viruses, even reverse aging." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. "It's incredible, but also terrifying. Is this why they're chasing us?" Elizabeth nodded solemnly. "Exactly. In the wrong hands, this technology could be used to create super soldiers, to control entire populations. It's too much power." "And what are we going to do now?" Sarah asked, feeling the weight of the responsibility they carried. Goldstein exchanged a look with Elizabeth before responding. "We have to make sure this information doesn't fall into the wrong hands. But we also need to find a way to use it for the benefit of all humanity." Elizabeth approached a particular rock on the cave floor and moved it, revealing a secret compartment. From it, she pulled out a small device that looked like a flash drive. "Here it is," she said, holding the device. "All our discoveries encrypted and protected. With this, we can rebuild our research in a safe place." Sarah looked at the small object in awe. Something so small, and yet it contained the power to change the world. Suddenly, Max began to growl softly, his ears alert. Seconds later, they heard voices again, this time closer. "We have to go," Goldstein whispered urgently. "Now." Quickly, they gathered their things and prepared to leave. Before leaving the cave, Sarah took one last look at the drawings on the walls, aware that she was leaving behind a treasure trove of invaluable knowledge. As they ventured back into the forest, now with a new sense of purpose and determination, Sarah couldn't help but think about how much her life had changed in such a short time. From being a simple nurse caring for a dog, she now found herself at the center of a conspiracy that could change the course of human history. What they didn't know was that their escape was about to lead them to an encounter that would test not only their bravery, but also their deepest convictions. Fate had a surprise in store for them that would change the course of their mission in a way none of them could have imagined. The evening light filtered through the trees as the Goldstein family continued their arduous trek through the forest. Fatigue was beginning to take its toll, especially on Sarah, who wasn't accustomed to this type of intense physical activity. Max, loyal as ever, walked by her side, occasionally looking up at her with concerned eyes. "Not much further," Elizabeth announced, consulting a small GPS device she had pulled from her pocket. "The abandoned train station should be about 2 kilometers from here." Goldstein, who was bringing up the rear, nodded gravely. We must hurry. Night will fall soon, and it'll be harder to move without being detected. Sarah, panting slightly, couldn't help but ask, Mom, how did you know about this station? And how are you so sure there will be a train? Elizabeth smiled mysteriously. During my years in hiding, I established a network of contacts and escape routes. This station is part of an underground resistance network I've been cultivating. Resistance? Sarah asked, intrigued. Against whom exactly? Against those who want to use science to control rather than liberate, Elizabeth responded firmly. There are more people than you'd think fighting against the misuse of genetic technology. As they advanced, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on how drastically her life had changed in such a short time. From being a simple nurse, she now found herself in the middle of a struggle that could determine the future of humanity. Suddenly, Max stopped dead in his tracks, his ears erect and a low growl emanating from his throat. What's wrong, boy? Sarah whispered, stroking his head to calm him. Goldstein quickly approached, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Something's not right. Max senses something. He had barely finished speaking when they heard the unmistakable sound of branches breaking under someone's feet. The family instinctively crouched, seeking cover behind dense bushes. Do you think they found us? Sarah whispered, her heart racing. Elizabeth shook her head. They're not moving like a search team. It seems to be just one person. Indeed, moments later, a solitary figure emerged from among the trees. To everyone's surprise, it was a young woman, perhaps a few years older than Sarah. She carried a backpack and seemed as surprised to see them as they were to see her. Who are you? Asked the stranger, her voice mixed with caution and curiosity. Goldstein stepped forward, placing himself protectively in front of his family. We should be asking you that. What are you doing in the middle of this forest? The woman looked at them for a moment, before a spark of recognition lit up her eyes. Wait, Elizabeth? Elizabeth Goldstein? Elizabeth came out of hiding, studying the young woman carefully. Suddenly, her face lit up with understanding. Sophia, is that you? The woman, Sophia, smiled broadly. I can't believe it. When I received the coded message, I never imagined I'd actually find you here. Sarah looked confusedly from her mother to the newcomer. Coded message? Mom, who is she? Elizabeth put a hand on Sarah's shoulder. Sophia is one of my contacts in the resistance network. She's a brilliant geneticist who has been working in secret to counteract the efforts of those who want to use our research for nefarious purposes. Sophia approached, extending her hand to Sarah. You must be Sarah. Your mother has told me a lot about you. It's an honor to finally meet you. Sarah shook Sophia's hand, still trying to process this new information. I didn't know my mother had such an extensive network. Goldstein, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Sophia, is the path to the station safe? Sophia nodded. For now, yes, but we don't have much time. The freight train will pass in less than an hour, and it's our best chance to get out of here undetected. As the group set off again, now with Sophia as their guide, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. On one hand, she was relieved to have additional help. On the other, the revelations about the extent of her mother's network made her feel even smaller in the grand scheme of things. As they approached the abandoned station, Sophia began to explain more about the current situation. Things have escalated quickly in the last few days, she said in a low voice as they walked. The group chasing you, a secret faction of the government known as Project Genesis, has intensified their efforts. They believe they're close to replicating your research, doctors. Goldstein. Elizabeth and Goldstein exchanged worried looks. That's impossible, Goldstein murmured. Without the key we developed. They have almost unlimited resources, Sophia interrupted, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get what they want. Sarah, listening attentively, couldn't contain her curiosity. What would happen if they managed to replicate the research? Sophia's face darkened. If they succeed, they would have the power to rewrite the human genetic code at will. They could create enhanced human beings, solder loyalty into people's DNA, eliminate free will. The possibilities are as vast as they are terrifying. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. The magnitude of what was at stake was beginning to fully settle in her mind. Finally, they reached a clearing where the dilapidated structure of the old train station stood. In the distance, they could hear the whistle of an approaching train. It's now or never, said Sophia, directing them to a point where they could safely board the freight train. As they prepared to make the jump that would take them to their next destination, Sarah looked at her family and their new ally. In their eyes, she saw determination, fear, hope, and above all, the strength that comes from knowing they're fighting for something bigger than themselves. The train was approaching, its roar filling the air. Sarah took a deep breath, patting Max to reassure him. They were about to embark on the next stage of their journey, one that would take them deeper into the heart of the mystery surrounding her family and the research that could change the fate of humanity. What they didn't know was that, aboard that train, they would find not only a means of escape but also a crucial piece of the puzzle they were trying to solve. An unexpected encounter awaited them, one that would test their loyalties and force them to question everything they thought they knew about friends and enemies. The roar of the freight train filled the air as the Goldstein family, along with Sophia and Max, prepared to board. Sarah felt her heart pounding, a mix of adrenaline and fear coursing through her body. "Now!" shouted Sophia, as the train began to pass in front of them at a relatively low speed. With a fluid motion, Goldstein jumped first, clinging to the ladder of a freight car. He quickly turned to help Elizabeth. Sarah watched in amazement as her mother, despite the years that had passed, demonstrated surprising agility. "Your turn, Sarah," called Elizabeth, extending her hand. Sarah swallowed hard, looking at the moving train with apprehension. She felt Max press his muzzle against her leg, as if giving her encouragement. With a deep breath, she ran alongside the train and jumped, grabbing her mother's hand. For a terrifying moment, she felt her feet dragging on the ground, but with a strong pull, Elizabeth lifted her onto the platform. Sophia was the last to board, with a grace that denoted experience in this type of maneuver. Max, to everyone's surprise, jumped agilely after her, landing firmly on the platform. "Good boy!" exclaimed Sarah, hugging the dog with relief. Once all aboard, Goldstein forced open the door of the car and they quickly entered, closing it behind them. The interior was dark and filled with wooden crates, providing a perfect hiding place. "Where are we headed?" Sarah asked as they settled among the crates. Sophia pulled out a small map from her backpack. "This train is heading north. In a few hours, we'll reach a city where we have allies. There we can regroup and plan our next move." Elizabeth nodded, her face showing a mixture of relief and concern. "It's a good plan, but we must be cautious. Project Genesis has eyes everywhere." As the train advanced through the night, the group took advantage of the time to rest and share information. Sarah listened attentively as her mother and Sophia discussed the latest developments in the resistance. "We've managed to infiltrate some of our people into Project Genesis facilities," Sophia explained in a low voice. "The information they've obtained is concerning. They're close to a major breakthrough, but they need the final key to your research, Elizabeth." Goldstein, who had been checking the contents of his backpack, looked up. "What kind of breakthrough?" Sophia looked around, as if making sure no one else could hear before answering. "They've managed to modify specific genes related to obedience and loyalty. They envision a future where they can program people from conception to be loyal to certain ideologies or governments." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "That's terrifying. How can they think of doing something like that?" "Power corrupts, honey," Elizabeth responded sadly. "And the power to rewrite the very essence of human beings is the most dangerous form of power that exists." The conversation was interrupted by a metallic sound coming from the roof of the car. Everyone froze, holding their breath. Max raised his ears, alert. "What was that?" Sarah whispered. Before anyone could answer, the car door burst open. A figure slid inside, quickly closing it behind them. In the dim light, Sarah could make out a young man, perhaps her age, dressed entirely in black. Goldstein jumped to his feet, placing himself protectively in front of his family. "Who are you? How did you find us?" The newcomer raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Easy, I'm on your side. My name is Alex. I'm part of the resistance." Sophia stepped forward, studying the young man cautiously. "What's the code word?" "DNA helicopter," Alex responded without hesitation. Sophia visibly relaxed. "He's one of ours." Alex approached the group, his face showing a mixture of relief and urgency. "I'm glad I found you in time. We have a big problem." "What's going on?" Elizabeth asked, concern evident in her voice. "Project Genesis has discovered our plan," Alex explained. "They've sent a team to intercept this train. They'll be waiting at the next station. A tense silence fell over the group. Sarah looked at her parents, searching their faces for some sign of what to do. Goldstein was the first to speak. "We have to abandon the train before we reach the station. It's our only option." "But how?" Sarah asked. "We're in the middle of nowhere." Alex pulled out a small device from his pocket. "I have the coordinates of a safe meeting point. It's a few kilometers from the tracks, but if we jump at the right place, we can get there before dawn." Elizabeth looked at Goldstein, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, she nodded. "It's risky, but we don't have any other choice." As the group prepared for their dangerous jump, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mixture of fear and excitement. Each new turn in her adventure took her further from the life she knew, but also closer to discovering who she really was and what her role was in this larger struggle. Alex opened the car door, allowing the night wind to rush in roaring. "Get ready!" he shouted over the noise of the train. "We'll jump in a minute." Sarah looked at Max, who was watching her with eyes full of confidence. She stroked his head, finding comfort in the dog's unwavering loyalty. "We'll do this together, boy," she whispered to him. As they prepared to take the leap into the unknown, Sarah realized that despite the danger, she had never felt more alive. She was at the center of something important, something that could change the course of human history. What they didn't know was that their jump would lead them not only to a new hiding place, but also to the threshold of a discovery that would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about the Goldsteins' research and the true scope of Project Genesis. The wind roared fiercely as the train sped through the night. Sarah clung to the frame of the open car door, her heart pounding at the prospect of the jump they were about to make. 30 seconds, shouted Alex, his eyes fixed on the device he was holding. "Remember, bend your knees when you land and roll. The terrain is uneven." Goldstein approached Sarah, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You'll be fine, daughter. Trust your instincts." Sarah nodded, swallowing hard. She looked at Max, who was beside her, his eyes full of unwavering confidence. "We'll do this together, boy," she murmured, patting his head. 10 seconds, warned Alex. Elizabeth positioned herself near the door, ready to jump. Sophia did the same on the other side. Sarah could see the determination in their faces, which gave her a bit more courage. "Now," shouted Alex. In an instant, everything became a chaos of movement and adrenaline. Sarah saw her mother jump first, quickly followed by Sophia. Goldstein gave her a quick squeeze on the shoulder before launching himself into the void. "Let's go," exclaimed Alex, gently pushing Sarah. With her heart in her throat, Sarah closed her eyes and jumped, feeling Max jump alongside her. For a moment, she experienced a sensation of free fall that took her breath away. Then, the impact. Just as she had been instructed, Sarah bent her knees and rolled upon touching the ground. The terrain was uneven and covered with grass, which cushioned her fall somewhat. Still, she felt the impact reverberating throughout her body. She remained still for a moment, catching her breath and making sure she wasn't injured. Beside her, she heard Max's familiar panting. "Are you okay, boy?" she asked, extending a hand to touch him. The dog licked her hand in response, reassuring her. "Sarah!" Her mother's worried voice made her look up. Elizabeth was running towards her, closely followed by Goldstein. "I'm okay," said Sarah, slowly getting up, just a little shaken. Goldstein helped her to her feet, quickly examining her for injuries. "You did very well," he said with pride. Sophia and Alex joined the group, both seeming unharmed but agitated by the jump. "We have to move," Alex urged. "The meeting point is a few kilometers from here, and we must get there before dawn." The group set off quickly, with Alex guiding them through the rugged terrain. The night was dark, with only the moonlight to illuminate their path. Sarah could feel the tension in the air. Everyone was on alert, aware that Project Genesis could be on their heels. As they walked, Sarah approached Sophia, who seemed lost in thought. "Sophia," Sarah whispered, "can I ask you something?" The young scientist looked at her, nodding. "Of course. What do you want to know? How did you get involved in all this? In the resistance, I mean." Sophia smiled sadly. "It was because of my brother. He was one of the first to be affected by Project Genesis experiments." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What happened to him?" "They recruited him for a supposed genetic improvement program," Sophia explained, her voice filled with emotion. "They promised to cure his congenital heart disease, and they did, but they also changed other things. his personality, his memories. When I saw him again, he was no longer my brother. Sarah felt a wave of empathy towards Sophia. I'm so sorry. It must have been terrible. Sophia nodded. It was, but it also gave me a purpose. I swore I would do everything possible to stop Project Genesis and reverse what they did to my brother and others like him. Their conversation was interrupted by Alex, who suddenly stopped, raising a hand in warning. Something's not right, he murmured, scrutinizing the darkness ahead of them. Everyone stopped, sharpening their senses. Max began to growl softly, his hair standing on end. Suddenly, a bright light blinded them, coming from several powerful spotlights. Authoritative voices resonated in the night. Don't move! You're surrounded! Sarah's heart stopped for a moment. Had they been caught? Was this the end of their escape? But before they could react, Alex pulled a small device from his pocket and pressed a button. Immediately, a dense fog began to spring from the ground around them, quickly obscuring the area. Run! Shouted Alex. Follow me! Without time to think, the group launched into a run, following Alex's barely visible silhouette in the fog. Sarah could hear shouts of confusion and contradictory orders behind them, but she focused on keeping pace and not losing sight of the others. They ran for what seemed like an eternity, zigzagging between trees and jumping over rocks. Finally, Alex led them to a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. Once inside, panting and soaked, the group regrouped. Elizabeth hugged Sarah tightly, while Goldstein watched the entrance. Is everyone okay? Sophia asked, looking around with concern. There were general nods, though everyone seemed exhausted and shocked by the near capture. How did they find us? Goldstein asked, his voice tense. Alex shook his head. I don't know, but this confirms they have resources beyond what we imagined. Elizabeth approached Alex, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Or maybe we have a traitor among us. A tense silence fell over the group. Sarah looked around, noticing how everyone seemed to be evaluating each other with new eyes. We can't allow distrust to divide us, Sophia finally said. It's exactly what Project Genesis wants. Goldstein nodded slowly. Sophia is right. We must stay united. But we must also be more cautious than ever. Sarah, stroking Max to calm her own nerves, couldn't help but feel they were on the edge of a precipice. Loyalties would be tested, secrets revealed, and the decisions they made from now on could determine not only their fate, but that of all humanity. As the group began to plan their next move, Sarah realized she was no longer the same person who had started this journey. She had grown, she had strengthened, and she was ready to face whatever came. What they didn't know was that their true test was just beginning. In the depths of that cave, they would find a clue that would lead them to an amazing discovery, one that would change everything they thought they knew about Project Genesis and the very nature of the Goldsteins' research. The cave behind the waterfall was deeper than it appeared at first glance. As the group ventured further in, seeking a safe place to rest and regroup, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of claustrophobia and fascination. The damp rock walls gleamed faintly in the light of their flashlights, creating dancing shadows that seemed to come to life. We must be cautious, Elizabeth warned, her voice echoing in the narrow passage. These caves can be treacherous. Goldstein, who was leading the group, stopped abruptly. Look, he said, pointing ahead. The tunnel seems to split in two. Indeed, in front of them opened two passages, one that continued straight ahead and another that descended at a steep angle. Which one should we take? Sarah asked, looking alternately at both paths. Alex consulted his device, frowning. The signals are weak in here. I can't determine which is the safest path. Sophia approached the cave walls, examining them closely. Wait a moment, she said, her voice filled with excitement. There's something here. Everyone gathered around to see what Sophia had discovered. On the rock wall, barely visible under years of sediment, was a series of engraved symbols. Elizabeth gasped, recognizing them immediately. It can't be, she whispered. What is it, Mom? Sarah asked, intrigued by her mother's reaction. These symbols, Elizabeth explained, gently running her fingers over the engravings, are part of an ancient coding system that your father and I developed in the early days of our research. Goldstein approached, his eyes shining with recognition. Elizabeth is right. We used this code to communicate securely when we feared our work might be intercepted. But how did these symbols get here? Sophia asked, clearly fascinated. I don't know, Elizabeth replied, her voice a mix of amazement and concern. But their presence here can't be a coincidence. Sarah, feeling they were on the brink of an important discovery, asked, what do the symbols say? Goldstein and Elizabeth studied the engravings in silence for a few moments, their minds working to decipher the hidden message. It's a warning, Goldstein finally said, and a direction. The message says, danger lurks in the heights. Truth lies in the depths, Elizabeth translated. A tense silence fell over the group as they processed this information. Seems pretty clear, Alex said after a moment. We should take the path that descends. However, Sophia didn't seem convinced. What if it's a trap? What if someone else discovered your code and is using it to deceive us? Doubt was reflected on everyone's faces. Sarah looked at Max, who was sniffing the air with interest, his ears erect as if trying to catch some distant sound. What do you think, boy? Sarah asked him quietly. Which path should we take? To everyone's surprise, Max decisively headed towards the descending passage, looking back as if inviting them to follow him. Well, Goldstein said with a slight smile, it seems Max has made the decision for us. Cautiously, the group began to descend through the tunnel. The path was steep and slippery, forcing them to advance slowly and carefully. Sarah could feel the humidity increasing as they ventured deeper into the earth. After what seemed like an eternity, the tunnel finally opened into a large cavern. The light from their flashlights revealed an astonishing spectacle. The cavern was filled with crystalline formations that sparkled and reflected light in 1,000 different directions. It's beautiful, Sarah whispered, marveling at the natural beauty that surrounded them. But the beauty of the cavern soon took a back seat when Sophia noticed something in the center of the space. Look, she said, pointing ahead. There's something there. In the center of the cavern, on a pedestal of natural rock, was an ancient metal chest. Its surface was covered with the same symbols they had seen at the entrance of the cave. Elizabeth and Goldstein approached the chest with reverence, as if they were before a sacred relic. I can't believe it, Elizabeth murmured. After all these years. What is it? Sarah asked, approaching with curiosity. Goldstein turned to the group, his face a mixture of emotion and concern. If this chest contains what I think it contains, it could be the key to stopping Project Genesis once and for all. With trembling hands, Elizabeth and Goldstein began to decipher the complex locking mechanism of the chest. The others watched in silence, aware that they were about to witness something transcendental. Finally, with a soft click, the chest opened. Sarah held her breath as her parents revealed the contents, an old laboratory notebook and a small electronic device that seemed decades ahead of its time. It's the original diary of our research, Elizabeth explained, her voice filled with emotion, and the prototype of the first DNA sequencer we developed. With this, Goldstein added, we can not only prove the truth about Project Genesis, but we also have the power to reverse any unethical genetic modification they've performed. Sarah felt the weight of this discovery fall upon her. This was her family's legacy, the reason they had been fleeing and fighting all this time. However, before they could celebrate their find, a distant noise alerted them. It sounded like voices and footsteps approaching from the tunnel they had come through. They've followed us, Alex said, his voice tense. We need to move now. Quickly, they stored the diary and the device in their backpacks. Sarah noticed there was another exit on the opposite side of the cavern. That way, she indicated, pointing to the new tunnel. It could be our only way out. As the group hurried towards the new exit, Sarah couldn't help but feel they were on the brink of something big. They had found a crucial piece of the puzzle, but many questions remained unanswered. Who had left the chest in the cave? How did they know they would find it? And most importantly, how would they use this new knowledge to stop Project Genesis and protect the future of humanity? As they entered the new tunnel, with the sound of their pursuers growing ever louder, Sarah knew that the answers to these questions would determine not only their fate but that of the entire world. What they didn't know was that on the other side of that tunnel, an even more shocking discovery awaited them, one that would change everything they thought they knew about the nature of their struggle and the true origins of Project Genesis. The group advanced rapidly through the new tunnel, their footsteps echoing off the rock walls. Sarah could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, driven by the recent discovery and the imminent threat of their pursuers. Where does this tunnel lead? Sarah asked between breaths as she ran alongside Sophia. I don't know, Sophia replied, her voice tense from the effort. But at this point, any direction is better than staying behind. The tunnel seemed endless, winding through the mountain like the veins of a giant organism. Suddenly, Max, who was at the head of the group, began to bark enthusiastically. "Look!" exclaimed Alex, pointing ahead. "I see light!" Indeed, a faint glow was filtering from what appeared to be the end of the tunnel. With renewed energy, the group quickened their pace. They emerged into a wide cavern illuminated by an opening in the ceiling, through which the light of dawn was seeping. But what they saw left them breathless. The cavern wasn't empty. In the center, surrounded by high-tech equipment, was an improvised laboratory, and standing next to a table full of instruments was a familiar figure. "Dr. Wilson!" Sarah exclaimed, incredulous. Dr. Wilson turned towards them, his face a mixture of surprise and relief. "Sarah, Elizabeth, Richard," he said, taking a step towards them. "You've finally arrived." Goldstein stepped forward, placing himself protectively in front of his family. "What does this mean, James? Have you betrayed us?" Dr. Wilson raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "It's not what it seems. I assure you I'm on your side. I always have been." Elizabeth narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Then why have we found evidence that you received payments from Project Genesis?" "Ah," Wilson sighed. "I see you've discovered the chest. Good. That will make explanations easier." He approached a computer and typed quickly. A holographic screen materialized in the center of the cavern, showing a complex network of connections and data. "What you're seeing," Wilson explained, "is the true structure of Project Genesis, and my role in it." Sarah observed the screen, trying to make sense of the information she was seeing. "I don't understand," she said. "What does all this mean?" Wilson took a deep breath before continuing. "Project Genesis is not what you think. It's not just a government initiative to control genetic research. It's much bigger and older." "What do you mean?" Goldstein asked, his voice mixed with curiosity and apprehension. "Project Genesis," Wilson continued, "began decades ago as a secret initiative to protect humanity from existential threats. Threats such as global pandemics, catastrophic climate change, even extraterrestrial contact." A stunned silence fell over the group. Sarah felt as if the ground was moving beneath her feet. Aliens, existential threats, it all seemed straight out of a science fiction movie. "This is madness," Sophia murmured, verbalizing what everyone was thinking. Wilson nodded understandingly. "I know. It sounds incredible, but I assure you it's the truth. And your research, Elizabeth and Richard, became the centerpiece of our efforts to prepare humanity for these challenges." "But why all the secrecy?" Elizabeth asked, her voice filled with emotion. "Why separate us? Why make us believe we were enemies?" "Because knowledge is power," Wilson responded gravely. "And this knowledge in particular is too powerful for any faction to control completely. We needed to ensure that the research was developed in a balanced way, with checks and balances." Sarah, trying to process all this information, stepped forward. "So, all of this has been some kind of test? An elaborate game to protect the research?" Wilson looked at her with a mixture of pride and sadness. "In part, yes, but it was also necessary to prepare you, Sarah." "Prepare me?" Sarah asked, confused. "For what?" "For you to take your place in all of this," Wilson responded. "You see, Sarah, you are more than just the daughter of two brilliant scientists. You are the result of decades of careful research. Your genetic code is unique, designed to make you the perfect person to lead the next phase of Project Genesis." Sarah felt as if the air had been ripped from her lungs. She looked at her parents, seeking denial, but only saw guilt and sadness in their eyes. "Is it true?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Elizabeth approached her daughter, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, honey. We never wanted you to find out this way, but yes, it's true. Your birth was planned, but that doesn't mean we don't love you with all our hearts." Goldstein joined them, placing a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You are our greatest achievement, Sarah, not just scientifically but as parents. You are everything we ever dreamed of and more." Sarah felt as if her world was crumbling around her. Her entire life, her identity, even her very existence, seemed to be part of a grand experiment. She felt used, manipulated, but before she could express her feelings, a deafening noise filled the cavern. Bright lights flooded the space from the opening in the ceiling. "They've found us!" shouted Alex, snapping everyone out of their emotional stupor. Wilson moved quickly towards a control panel. "There's no time for more explanations. You must make a decision now. You can come with me, accept your roles in Project Genesis, and help save humanity. Or you can flee and continue fighting against something you don't fully understand." Sarah looked around at her parents, at Sophia, at Alex, at Max. In their eyes, she saw fear, confusion, but also determination. At that moment, Sarah knew that the decision she made would not only define her future, but possibly the future of all humanity. With her heart beating strongly and her mind in a whirlwind of emotions, she prepared to make the most important choice of her life. What she didn't know was that her decision would trigger a series of events that would change the course of human history forever, leading her to a destiny that not even Project Genesis could have foreseen. Time seemed to have stopped in the cavern. Sarah, her heart racing wildly, looked alternately at her parents, Dr. Wilson, and the cave entrance, where the sounds of their pursuers were growing louder. "Sarah," her mother's voice snapped her out of her trance. "I know this is a lot to process, but we need to make a decision now." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, trying to clear her mind. When she opened them, her gaze was filled with determination. "No," she said firmly, surprising everyone. "I won't make this decision alone. We've come this far together, and together we'll decide what to do." Goldstein smiled proudly. "Our daughter is right, Elizabeth. This affects all of us." Dr. Wilson, visibly anxious, intervened. "We don't have much time. Project Genesis will wait," Sarah interrupted. "First, we need clear answers. No more secrets, no more manipulations." Sophia stepped forward, supporting Sarah. "I agree. We've been pawns in this game for too long. We deserve to know the whole truth before making any decision." Alex, who had been watching the entrance, joined the conversation. "The sounds are getting closer. If we're going to talk, it needs to be quick." Dr. Wilson, seeing the determination in everyone's eyes, nodded resignedly. "Very well. Ask what you want to know, but be brief." "First," Sarah began, "what exactly is my role in all of this? What does it mean that I was designed to lead the next phase of Project Genesis?" Elizabeth took her daughter's hand before responding. "Sarah, your genetic code was carefully selected to maximize certain capabilities: intelligence, empathy, disease resistance, longevity. But most importantly, you have a unique ability to understand and manipulate genetic code in a way that no one else can. It's as if you could speak directly to DNA," Goldstein added. "This ability is crucial to face the threats that Dr. Wilson mentioned." Sarah processed this information, her mind working at full speed. "And the people chasing us, are they really part of Project Genesis, or are they a separate faction?" Dr. Wilson answered, "They're a faction within the project that believes the end justifies the means. They want to use the research to control the population, not to protect it. That's why it was crucial to keep you separated and on the move." Sophia, who had been listening attentively, posed the next question. "What about my brother and the other people who were modified?" "They were unauthorized experiments," Wilson admitted regretfully. "Part of that faction's efforts to advance their own objectives. With the complete research, we could reverse those changes." Alex, who until now had remained silent, spoke. "And what guarantee do we have that you, who claim to be the good guys of Project Genesis, won't abuse this power?" "None," Wilson responded honestly. "Except our word and mutual oversight. That's why we need Sarah and all of you. To maintain the balance." The sounds of their pursuers grew louder, indicating that time was running out. Sarah looked at each of those present, seeing in their eyes a mixture of fear, determination, and hope. "I have an idea," Sarah finally said, "but I need everyone to trust me." "What do you have in mind, honey?" Elizabeth asked. Sarah took a deep breath before explaining, "We're going to face them. Not by running, not by hiding, but by showing them the truth. If I really have this special ability, we'll use it to convince them." "It's risky," Goldstein warned. "I know," Sarah responded, "but it's our best chance to end this division once and for all. United, we are stronger." Dr. Wilson looked at her with a mixture of amazement and pride. "This is exactly why you were created, Sarah. To unite, not to divide." With a collective nod, the group prepared to face their pursuers. Sarah, with Max faithfully by her side, positioned herself at the front. Her parents, Sophia, Alex, and Dr. Wilson, flanked her, forming a united front. As the footsteps approached, Sarah closed her eyes, concentrating intensely. For the first time, she felt something awakening within her, a connection to something larger, deeper. It was as if she could feel the pulse of life itself, the rhythm of the genetic code that united all existence. When she opened her eyes, they were filled with an inner light, an ancient yet futuristic knowledge. The first Project Genesis agents entered the cavern, weapons in hand, but they stopped short at the scene before them. "Lower your weapons," Sarah said, her voice resonating with an authority that surprised even her parents. "It's time for all of us to listen to the truth." To everyone's amazement, the agents obeyed, slowly lowering their weapons. Something in Sarah's presence, in the energy she emanated, compelled them to listen. Project Genesis was born to unite and protect, not to divide and control, Sarah continued, and it's time we return to that original purpose. Together, we can face the threats that are coming. Together, we can use this knowledge for the benefit of all humanity. As Sarah spoke, a soft light began to emanate from her, enveloping everyone present. It was as if she was weaving an invisible network, connecting each person in the cavern at a fundamental level. What happened in that cavern that day marked the beginning of a new era. An era of collaboration, of mutual understanding, of responsible use of genetic knowledge. Sarah had found her true purpose, not as an imposed leader, but as a bridge between different factions, between science and humanity. But as the group left the cavern, towards an uncertain but hopeful future, no one noticed the small blinking light on one of the laboratory equipments. A signal traveling towards the stars, announcing that humanity was finally ready for the next step in its evolution. What Project Genesis didn't know was that their efforts to prepare for extraterrestrial contact were about to bear fruit in a way that no one could have foreseen. And Sarah, with her unique gift, would be at the center of this encounter that would change the fate of humanity forever. The days following the dramatic encounter in the cavern were a whirlwind of activity and changes. Sarah, her parents, and the rest of the group found themselves at the center of a radical transformation of Project Genesis. The project's central headquarters, a high-tech complex hidden in the mountains, was buzzing with activity. Scientists, agents, and leaders from different factions were meeting in long sessions of debate and planning. Sarah, with her newly discovered ability to unite people, found herself mediating discussions that previously would have ended in irreconcilable conflicts. One morning, as Sarah was walking through the complex's hallways with Max by her side, she ran into Sophia, who looked exhausted but excited. "Sarah," Sophia called, quickly approaching, "I have incredible news. The advances we've made in the last few days, they're amazing." Sarah smiled, feeling her friend's excitement. "Tell me, what have you discovered?" Sophia looked around before speaking in a low voice. "We've managed to completely reverse the unethical genetic modifications in a group of volunteers, including my brother. It's as if they had never been altered." Sarah's eyes widened with surprise and joy. "Sophia, that's wonderful. How does your brother feel?" "He's becoming himself again," Sophia replied with tears of happiness in her eyes. "It's like he's waking up from a long dream. But that's not all. Your father wants to see you in the main laboratory. He says they've made a discovery that could change everything." Intrigued, Sarah headed to the laboratory, with Max faithfully trotting by her side. Upon entering, she found her parents, Dr. Wilson, and several other scientists gathered around a large holographic screen. "Ah, Sarah, you've arrived just in time," Goldstein said, gesturing for her to come closer. "Look at this." On the screen, Sarah saw a complex DNA sequence that was pulsing and changing. "What am I looking at?" she asked, fascinated by the hypnotic pattern. Elizabeth approached, her face lit up with the excitement of discovery. "This, honey, is your DNA sequence, but it's not static like most people's. Watch." Before Sarah's astonished eyes, the sequence began to change, adapting and evolving in real time. "It's incredible," Sarah murmured. "But what does it mean?" Dr. Wilson took the floor. "It means that your DNA has the ability to adapt and evolve in response to its environment in a way we've never seen before. It's as if your body was constantly preparing to face new challenges. And there's more," Goldstein added. "We've discovered that when you're in close contact with other people, your DNA seems to communicate with theirs. It's subtle, but it's there. We believe this is the basis of your ability to unite people." Sarah was left speechless, trying to process the magnitude of this revelation. Max, sensing her agitation, approached and rested his head against her leg, offering silent comfort. "What does this mean for the future?" Sarah finally asked. "For humanity?" Elizabeth smiled softly. "It means we're on the brink of a new era of human evolution. An evolution guided not by blind natural selection, but by a deep understanding of our own genetic code. But with this knowledge comes great responsibility," Dr. Wilson warned. "The potential for misuse still exists. That's why we need your leadership, Sarah. Your ability to unite people will be crucial to ensuring this knowledge is used for the benefit of all." Sarah nodded slowly, feeling the weight of this responsibility on her shoulders. But before she could respond, an alarm began to sound throughout the complex. Alex burst into the laboratory, his face a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "How you have to see this," he exclaimed, activating a screen on the wall. The image that appeared left everyone breathless. It was a live transmission from the project's space observatory. In the night sky, visible to the whole world, a formation of lights was moving in a clearly unnatural pattern. "It can't be," Goldstein whispered. "It's real," Alex confirmed. "Space stations around the world are confirming it. We have company." A stunned silence fell over the room as everyone contemplated the implications of what they were seeing. Extraterrestrial contact, the threat for which Project Genesis had been preparing for decades, had finally arrived. Sarah felt a strange calm come over her. Somehow she knew this moment was what she had been prepared for all her life. Looking around at the amazed and fearful faces of the others, she knew what she had to do. "It's time," she said, with a firm voice that surprised even her parents. "All the efforts, all the struggles and sacrifices have led us to this moment. It's time for humanity to take the next step." As she spoke, Sarah felt something awakening within her, a power and understanding that went beyond anything she had experienced before. Her DNA, visible on the holographic screen, began to pulse with a bright light, as if it were resonating with something beyond her comprehension. "What's happening?" Sophia asked, looking alternately at Sarah and the screen. Dr. Wilson, observing the data flowing on the screens, responded with amazement. "It seems Sarah's DNA is communicating, not just with us, but with them." Sarah closed her eyes, letting this new sensation flood her. She could feel, in a way she couldn't explain, the presence of the visitors. They weren't hostile, she understood. They were curious, waiting. When she opened her eyes, her gaze was filled with a determination and knowledge that went beyond her years. "Get ready," she said, her voice resonating with an authority that no one questioned. "We're about to welcome our first galactic visitors." As the complex burst into a frenzy of activity, preparing for an event that would change the course of human history, Sarah remained calm, the center of the storm. With Max by her side and her family and friends around her, she prepared to lead humanity towards a future that no one could have imagined. What no one knew was that this encounter would not only change Earth's destiny, but would trigger a series of events that would affect the entire galaxy. And at the center of it all was Sarah, a young woman whose journey was just beginning. The entire world held its breath as the alien ships slowly descended towards Earth. Media outlets were broadcasting live from every corner of the planet, showing images of the lights approaching, bright against the dawn sky. At the Project Genesis complex, activity was frantic. Scientists, diplomats, and world leaders had gathered in an improvised control room, all anxiously watching the screens that showed the ship's descent. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, surrounded by her parents, Sophia, Alex, and Dr. Wilson. Max, faithful as ever, remained by her side, his presence reassuring amidst the chaos. "The ships are entering the atmosphere," announced a technician, his voice tense with excitement. Elizabeth took Sarah's hand, squeezing it gently. "How do you feel, honey?" Sarah took a deep breath before responding. "It's strange, Mum, I can feel them. Not with my normal senses, but in some other way. It's as if my DNA were vibrating in tune with something larger." Goldstein looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "Remember everything you've learned, Sarah. Trust your instinct." The screen showed how the ships, three bright disc-shaped objects, descended gently into an open field not far from the complex. A tense silence fell over the room as everyone waited for the next move. Suddenly, Max began to bark, not in a threatening way, but as if he were greeting an old friend. "They're here," Sarah said, her voice calm but filled with an indefinable emotion. "I can feel them. They want to communicate." As if responding to a silent call, Sarah began to walk towards the exit. Her parents tried to stop her, but she reassured them with a look. "I need to go," she said with a certainty that surprised everyone. "I'm the bridge they've been waiting for." "Doctor." Wilson nodded slowly. "She's right. Everything we've worked for has led us to this moment. Sarah is the key." Reluctantly, the group followed Sarah as she left the complex and headed towards the field where the ships had landed. Max trotted by her side, showing no sign of fear. As they approached, they could see that a crowd had gathered at a safe distance, held back by a security cordon. Journalists, onlookers, and government officials watched with a mixture of awe and fascination. Sarah stopped about 100 meters from the ships. They were impressive up close, with surfaces that seemed to change color and texture constantly. "Now what?" Sophia whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. As if answering her question, a hatch opened on the nearest ship. A ramp extended to touch the ground and a figure emerged. A collective gasp ran through the crowd. The being descending the ramp was both familiar and completely alien. It had a vaguely humanoid shape, but its skin shimmered with a bluish tone, and its eyes, large and expressive, seemed to contain entire galaxies. Sarah stepped forward, feeling every cell in her body vibrating in response to the visitor's presence. Without consciously thinking about it, she extended her hand in a greeting gesture. The alien being stopped at the foot of the ramp, observing Sarah with a gaze that seemed to penetrate to her soul. Slowly, it raised its own hand, mirroring Sarah's gesture. The moment their hands were about to touch, something extraordinary happened. A field of luminous energy formed between them, pulsing with colors that the human eye had never seen before. Sarah felt as if her mind was expanding, connecting with something vast and ancient. Images, emotions, and knowledge flowed through her like a torrent. She saw the history of a civilization that had traveled among the stars for eons, seeking other forms of intelligent life. She felt their loneliness, their curiosity, and above all, their hope in finally finding humanity. When the contact ended, Sarah staggered slightly, overwhelmed by the experience. Max approached, leaning against her to give her stability. The alien being inclined its head in a gesture that seemed to be of respect. Then, to everyone's amazement, it spoke. Its voice was soft and melodious, and somehow everyone could understand it. "Greetings, children of Earth," it said. "We have traveled far to find you. Sarah, your species has taken a great step today. You are ready to join the galactic community." Sarah, regaining her composure, responded, "We welcome you to our world. We have much to learn from each other." The being nodded. "Indeed. Your DNA, Sarah, is the bridge we have been seeking, a unique convergence of natural evolution and conscious design. With your help, our species can exchange knowledge that will benefit the entire galaxy." Goldstein stepped forward, his scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming his amazement. "What kind of knowledge?" The alien being turned its gaze to him. "Cures for diseases you haven't yet discovered, technology to heal your planet, and most importantly, the understanding of your place in the cosmos." Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes, asked, "And what do you ask in return?" "Collaboration," the being responded, "and the promise that you will use this knowledge wisely. The power you are about to acquire comes with great responsibility." Sarah felt the weight of that responsibility on her shoulders, but also an indescribable excitement at the possibilities that were opening up before them. "We are ready," she said, her voice filled with determination. "To learn, to grow, and to take our place among the stars." As the sun rose on the horizon, bathing the scene in a golden light, Sarah realized that this was not the end of her journey, but merely the beginning. A new chapter was opening for humanity, full of promises and challenges that they couldn't even imagine. What no one knew at that moment was that the arrival of the alien visitors would not only change Earth's destiny, but would trigger a series of events that would resonate throughout the entire galaxy. And at the center of it all was Sarah, a young woman whose extraordinary gift would be the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe itself. The days following the historic encounter with the alien visitors were a whirlwind of activity and emotions for Sarah and everyone involved in Project Genesis. The entire world seemed to have entered a state of collective awe, trying to process the reality that we were not alone in the universe. At the Project Genesis complex, now converted into the operations center for interactions with the visitors, Sarah found herself in the eye of the hurricane. Her unique ability to communicate with the aliens had made her the de facto ambassador of humanity. One morning, as Sarah was preparing for another session of knowledge exchange with the visitors, she found herself reflecting on how drastically her life had changed in such a short time. Max, faithful as ever, rested at her feet, seemingly unperturbed by the cosmic events unfolding around him. "Ready for another day of galactic discoveries?" Sophia asked, entering the room with a tablet in hand. Sarah smiled, grateful for her friend's presence, as ready as one can be when each day brings revelations that challenge everything we thought we knew. Sophia nodded understandingly. "I've been reviewing the data from our latest sessions. Sarah, what we're learning, it's simply amazing. Theories we thought would take centuries to prove or disprove are being resolved in a matter of days." "I know," Sarah responded, her voice mixed with awe and a touch of concern. "Sometimes I wonder if we're ready for all this knowledge, if we'll be able to handle it wisely." Before Sophia could respond, Alex rushed into the room. "Sarah, your parents need you in the main conference room. It seems there's a situation developing." Exchanging concerned looks, Sarah and Sophia quickly followed Alex. Upon entering the conference room, they found Elizabeth and Goldstein in a heated discussion with several world leaders through a video conference screen. "We can't simply ignore decades of geopolitical tensions overnight," one of the leaders was arguing. "But that's exactly what we need to do," Elizabeth responded firmly. "The presence of the visitors changes everything. We need global unity now more than ever." Sarah approached, with Max following closely. "What's going on?" Goldstein turned to his daughter, his face showing signs of stress. "Some countries are concerned about the distribution of the knowledge and technology we're receiving. They fear it could alter the global balance of power." Sarah felt a pang of frustration. Even in the face of an event as monumental as contact with an alien civilization, humanity was still trapped in its old disputes. "If I may," Sarah said, addressing the leaders on the screen, "what we're facing goes beyond our national borders or ideologies. The visitors see us as one species, one civilization. It's time we start seeing ourselves the same way." There was a moment of silence as everyone reflected on her words. Then one of the leaders spoke. "Ms. Goldstein, we understand your point of view, but how can we ensure that this new knowledge is used equitably and peacefully?" Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling that unique connection she had developed with the visitors' DNA. When she opened them, her gaze was filled with determination. "I propose the creation of a global council," she said. "Not just of political leaders, but of scientists, philosophers, artists, and representatives from all Earth's cultures. This council will oversee the implementation and distribution of the knowledge we receive. And to ensure transparency," she added, "we'll use the visitors' technology to create a global communication network. Every advance, every discovery will be available to everyone in real time." Sarah's proposal was met with contemplative silence. Gradually, the leaders began to nod, recognizing the wisdom in her words. "It's ambitious," one of them said, "but perhaps it's exactly what we need in these unprecedented times." As the discussion continued, now with a more constructive tone, Sarah felt a familiar presence. She turned to see one of the alien visitors, whom they had called Tsar, standing at the entrance of the room. "You have spoken with wisdom, Sarah," Tsar said, his voice resonating in the minds of all present. "Your species is taking important steps towards unity and understanding." Sarah inclined her head in respect. "We still have much to learn." "Indeed," Tsar responded, "but every journey begins with a single step, and today you have taken a significant step." As Tsar withdrew, Sarah felt a surge of emotions. Excitement for the future that was opening up before them, but also a deep sense of responsibility. The fate of humanity, its place in the cosmos, depended greatly on the decisions they would make in the coming days and weeks. That night, as Sarah prepared for bed, with Max curled up at her feet, she reflected on the incredible journey she had embarked upon. From a simple nurse caring for a dog, she had become a key figure in humanity's destiny. "What have I gotten myself into, Max?" she whispered, stroking the dog's head. Max looked at her with his wise and loyal eyes, as if he perfectly understood the magnitude of the situation. His constant presence was a reminder to Sarah of the importance of staying connected to her roots, to her humanity, even as she ventured into the unknown. As she fell asleep, Sarah couldn't imagine the challenges and wonders that awaited her. The next chapter of her life and that of all humanity was about to begin. A chapter filled with discoveries, growth, and an expansion of human consciousness beyond the confines of Earth. What Sarah didn't know was that her role in this new era was just beginning. Her unique gift, her ability to unite people and species, would be fundamental in the events that would shape the future not only of Earth, but of the entire galaxy. 5 years had passed since the historic encounter with the alien visitors, and the world Sarah Goldstein knew had transformed in ways no one could have imagined. Earth, once divided by borders and conflicts, was now united under a common purpose: the exploration and understanding of the cosmos. High atop the Unity Tower, an impressive building that rose above the city of New Genesis, Sarah contemplated the horizon. The city, built with a blend of Earth and alien technology, was a testament to the incredible progress humanity had achieved in such a short time. Max, now an older dog but still full of energy, approached and rested his head on Sarah's leg. She smiled, affectionately stroking his fur. "We've come a long way, haven't we, boy?" "Indeed we have," said a familiar voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Zar, the alien ambassador with whom she had formed a special bond over the years. His luminous form shimmered softly in the evening light. "Zar, I didn't hear you come in," Sarah said with a smile. "How's the conference going?" "Productively," Zar replied. "The Intergalactic Council is impressed with Earth's progress. Your species has exceeded all expectations." Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. "We've had good teachers." "And an excellent ambassador," Zar added, inclining his head in respect. The sound of the door opening interrupted their conversation. Sophia entered, carrying a tablet in her hands. "Sarah, we have the results from the latest DNA fusion experiment. It's incredible." Sarah took the tablet, her eyes quickly scanning the data. Is this what I think it is?" Sophia nodded, her eyes shining with excitement. "We've done it. We've found a way to merge beneficial aspects of DNA from different species without compromising individual genetic integrity. The implications for medicine and evolution are endless." Zar approached, observing the data with interest. "This discovery marks an important milestone. You are ready for the next step." "The next step?" Sarah asked, intrigued. Before Zar could respond, the door opened again. Elizabeth and Goldstein entered, followed by Alex and Dr. Wilson. "Ah, you're all here," Elizabeth said, her face radiant with pride. "Perfect. We have exciting news." Goldstein stepped forward. "The Global Council has approved the proposal. Earth will officially join the Galactic Federation." An astonished silence fell over the room as everyone processed the magnitude of this news. "This changes everything," Alex murmured. "Our place in the universe." "It doesn't change," Sarah interrupted gently. "It just expands. Our home will always be Earth, but now we have the opportunity to explore and learn beyond our nearest stars." "Doctor." Wilson smiled. "Well said, Sarah. And speaking of exploration, there's something else you should know." Everyone turned to him, expectant. "The Galactic Federation has proposed a mission," Dr. Wilson continued. "An expedition to explore the farthest reaches of the galaxy, and they want Earth to lead the team." Sarah felt her heart race at the prospect. "It's an incredible opportunity. But are we ready?" Zar approached her, his presence emanating warmth and wisdom. "The question, Sarah, is not whether you are ready. It's whether you are willing. The universe is full of wonders and challenges that you can't even imagine, but your species has demonstrated a unique capacity to adapt, to unite, to see beauty in diversity. Those qualities will be invaluable in the journeys that await you." Sarah looked around at the faces of her loved ones and colleagues. She saw in them the same awe, the same excitement and determination that she felt in her heart. "Then," she said, her voice full of conviction, "we accept the mission. It's time for humanity to take its next great step." As the sun set over New Genesis, bathing the city in golden and purple hues, Sarah felt a deep sense of purpose and hope. The journey that had begun years ago, when she was a simple nurse caring for a dog, had led her to places she could never have imagined. In the days and weeks that followed, preparations for the galactic mission were set in motion. A diverse crew of scientists, explorers, and diplomats from all over the world was selected. The ship, a marvel of engineering that combined the best of Earth and alien technology, was christened Horizon. The night before the launch, Sarah found herself once again atop the Unity Tower. Max, faithful as ever, was by her side. As she contemplated the stars, she reflected on everything that had happened and everything that was to come. "Ready for your next big adventure?" asked a familiar voice. Sarah turned to see her parents, Elizabeth and Goldstein, approaching. "As ready as one can be when you're about to embark on a journey into the unknown," she responded with a smile. Elizabeth hugged her daughter. "We're so proud of you, honey. You've grown so much, and you've taken all of humanity with you," Goldstein added, his eyes shining with emotion. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, without all of you." As the family shared a moment of connection, Sophia and Alex joined them, followed shortly after by Dr. Wilson and Zar. "Looks like we all had the same idea," Sophia commented with a smile. "One last gathering before the big day," Alex nodded. Zar observed the group with what seemed to be an expression of affection. "In all my years traveling among the stars, I have never seen a species with as much potential as yours. The journey you're about to embark upon will change not just Earth but the entire galaxy." Sarah looked at each of her companions, her chosen family, feeling a wave of gratitude and love. "Whatever happens out there," she said, "we'll carry with us the best of humanity. Our curiosity, our compassion, our ability to adapt, and above all, our capacity to love and connect." As the group shared one last moment of unity under the stars, Sarah knew that no matter how far they traveled or what wonders they discovered, she would always carry with her the spirit of this moment, of these people, of this planet she called home. The next morning, as Horizon rose majestically into the sky, carrying Sarah and her team towards the stars, millions of people on Earth watched with awe and hope. It was the beginning of a new era for humanity, a chapter filled with infinite possibilities. And so, with her heart full of excitement and her eyes fixed on the vast cosmos that awaited her, Sarah Goldstein embarked on her greatest adventure yet. The universe was vast and mysterious, but with each challenge they faced, with each new world they discovered, humanity would grow, learn, and come a little closer to understanding its place in the great cosmic tapestry. The journey was just beginning, and the horizons were truly infinite. As the horizon soared through the cosmos, leaving Earth's solar system behind, Sarah stood at the observation deck, her eyes fixed on the infinite expanse of stars before her. Max, who had been allowed to join the mission as Earth's first canine space explorer, sat loyally by her side. The dog's presence was a comforting reminder of home amidst the vastness of space. "It's breathtaking, isn't it?" Sophia's voice broke Sarah's reverie. Her friend joined her at the window, her face a mixture of awe and excitement. "More than I ever imagined," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "To think, each of those points of light could be home to civilizations we've yet to meet." Their moment of quiet contemplation was interrupted by Alex's voice over the intercom. "Sarah, Sophia, we're approaching the coordinates provided by the Galactic Federation. You might want to come to the bridge." With a shared look of anticipation, Sarah and Sophia made their way to the ship's control center, Max trotting along beside them. As they entered the bridge, they were greeted by a flurry of activity. The crew, a diverse mix of Earth's brightest minds, worked in harmony with the advanced alien technology that powered the Horizon. "What's our status?" Sarah asked, assuming her role as mission commander with natural ease. Dr. Wilson, who had taken on the role of chief science officer, turned from his console with a look of excitement. "We're about to enter a region of space previously unexplored by the Federation. Our sensors are picking up, something extraordinary." As if on cue, the main view screen lit up with an image that took everyone's breath away. Before them stretched a massive structure, clearly artificial, yet organic in its design. It seemed to pulse with an inner light, its surface shimmering with colors that defied description. Is that what I think it is?" Goldstein asked, his scientific curiosity piqued. Zar, who had joined the mission as a representative of the Galactic Federation, stepped forward. "It appears to be a nexus," he said, his voice filled with awe. A cosmic hub of sorts, theorized to exist by our most advanced scientists but never before encountered. A nexus? Sarah echoed, her mind racing with the implications. What exactly does it do? In theory, Zar explained, a nexus serves as a focal point for the universe's energies. It could be a gateway to other dimensions, a repository of cosmic knowledge, or perhaps something beyond our current understanding. As the horizon drew closer to the nexus, Sarah felt a familiar tingling sensation, reminiscent of her first contact with the alien visitors on Earth. Her DNA seemed to resonate with the energy emanating from the structure. "I can feel it," she murmured, instinctively reaching out towards the image on the screen. "It's calling to us." Suddenly, a beam of light shot out from the nexus, enveloping the horizon in a soft, pulsating glow. Alarms blared throughout the ship, but they seemed distant and muffled to Sarah's ears. She felt herself being drawn towards the nexus, not physically, but on a deeper, almost spiritual level. "Sarah," Elizabeth's voice cut through the haze. "Your DNA, it's changing again." Sarah looked down at her hands, which were now shimmering with the same ethereal light as the nexus. She could feel her consciousness expanding, connecting not just with the structure before them, but with the very fabric of the universe itself. In that moment of cosmic connection, Sarah understood. The nexus wasn't just a structure or a gateway. It was a test, a crucible designed to challenge species that had reached a certain level of evolution. And humanity, through her, was being offered a choice. "We stand at a crossroads," Sarah said, her voice resonating with newfound power and understanding. "The nexus offers us knowledge and power beyond our wildest dreams. But with it comes a responsibility greater than anything we've ever faced." The crew of the Horizon, along with Max, gathered around Sarah, drawn by the energy radiating from her. "What do we do?" Alex asked, his voice a mixture of fear and excitement. Sarah looked at each of her companions, seeing in their eyes the same questions, the same hopes and fears that she felt. She then turned her gaze back to the nexus, its pulsating energy a silent invitation to a new chapter in human evolution. "We take the next step," Sarah said with determination. "But we do it together, carrying with us the best of what makes us human, our compassion, our curiosity, and our unwavering spirit of exploration." As Sarah spoke these words, the light from the nexus intensified, enveloping the entire ship. The crew of the Horizon, with Sarah at their center, felt themselves being transported not just physically, but to a new plane of existence. In that moment, as they stood on the threshold of a new era for humanity, Sarah realized that their journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The universe, with all its wonders and challenges, awaited them. And together, they would face whatever lay ahead, forging a path not just for Earth but for all sentient beings across the cosmos. As the Horizon and its crew were embraced by the Nexus, disappearing from normal spacetime, a new chapter in the cosmic story began to unfold. The legacy of a young woman who once cared for a dying dog had become the catalyst for humanity's greatest adventure. And somewhere in the vastness of the universe, new horizons beckoned, promising discoveries and challenges that would reshape the very nature of existence itself. The journey continues, infinitely,